The sacred is very much, of course, at the centre. And the sacred, I say, that word can also have a lot of baggage, like pilgrimage is. But for me, the sacred is just about tapping into this universal experience that we all sometimes catch a glimpse of when we're deeply present, where you're just feeling the subtle... The word magic is the only thing that comes to my mind, but that subtle magic of life that is there. And it could be as simple as when you are just having your morning tea and watching the sunrise, but you're touched in that moment. And for me, pilgrimage is what opens the ability to go into that. So it's a multi-layered experience in that your inner world is transforming as you walk through this outer landscape. And in more recent times, it's been incredible, and that pilgrimage is also now taking on another meaning, whereby pilgrimage is being used as a channel to create change for the landscapes that we are actually walking through.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The story of Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system called nature, which keeps everything replenished as long as we all respect it and participate wisely. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with folk involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, writers, activists, designers, adventurers, healers, farmers, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of life-sustaining cultures, in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth. Greetings, Earthling. Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. Thank you for tuning in. It means a lot that you have chosen to spend some time here with me. This is Dan. I'm your host and guide. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. The Spaceship Earth is a podcast exploring the intersections of ecology, culture, and transformation. It's where we're asking, how might we live with greater imagination and responsibility as crew members on board a living planet in crisis? We see two main stories on Spaceship Earth. There's the passenger story, which is the dominant story of capitalist modernity. It's a passive story of more, about control, individuals, nation states, and separate human selves. It's based on extraction, transaction, and distraction, and it's dividing us and destroying life and leading to collapse. This is the separation story. And then there's the crew story, an active story of community and relationships between humans and more than humans. It's based on connection, cooperation and participation, leading towards regeneration. This is a story of relationality and interconnection. The metaphor of Earth as a spaceship comes from Buckminster Fuller, who observed that we are all aboard this miraculous vessel called Earth, hurtling through space, utterly dependent on its life support systems. The danger is acting like passengers, entitled, disengaged, destructive freeloaders at worst. The invitation of becoming crew is a call to awaken into shared stewardship of the spaceship. It's an existential shift from entitlement to participation, from separation to interdependence, from spectating collapse to navigating complexity together. It's about repatterning how we relate to the Earth, with nature, as we call it, how we relate to ourselves and towards each other, and to the invisible scaffolding of modernity that still whispers in our frazzled minds, control, escape, purity, progress. So here on this podcast and in our Becoming Crew learning journeys, we vulnerably explore how might we live regeneratively? How do we attune to the places we're in, to our more than human kin, and to the planetary cycles? How do we metabolize the grief of violence and collapse without collapsing into despair? How to co-create life-sustaining cultures grounded in humility, not certainty. So, how are you doing out there? Well, what times we are in. Things seem to be getting more absurd, more violent, more unjust, more divisive, more extreme, and more overwhelming from what I can see from my little spot on Spaceship Earth. In my humble opinion, the correct response right now is to be cultivating care, connection, compassion, love through our actions and responses, and creating spaces for processing, listening, communing, healing, expressing, imagining. In my view, these are the vital areas of focus. Coming together, re-entangling, repatterning, not continuing the illusion of separation. And that work is messy. It's human scale work, and it will take all of us. And no one is going to tell us to do it either. So, one of the areas that I'm deepening into as a practitioner and crew member is place. The places around us that we call home. And this principle on the spaceship that the regenerative universe is created through local participation. So how we show up in the moment and how we relate and respond to life around us, human and more than human, is essential. If you're a regular listener, you'll know about a place-based initiative, a bioregional project, We Are Avon, based in the Avon Valley in the west of England where I live. We Are Avon is a place-based movement working to regenerate the landscapes, rivers and communities of the Avon catchment. Across Spaceship Earth, people in bigger numbers are recognising that the crises of climate change, biodiversity loss, water pollution and food insecurity are deeply interconnected. The health of our rivers reflect the health of our landscapes and the well-being of our communities. The Avon River connects more than 550,000 acres of land, 2 cities and 19 towns across a single watershed. If the Avon flourishes, the entire region flourishes. So We Are Avon exists to catalyse this transformation. And we're bringing together farmers, growers, citizens, landowners, conservationists, artists, activists, organisations, and local communities to restore the river, regenerate land and food systems, and to co-create a thriving bioregion that's rooted in care for place. I am currently one of the co-directors and have released several episodes from panels and live events that we've been doing in the last 18 months. And this episode is another one of those. So this was recorded live as a panel at our last community gathering at the Finisterre store in Bath. This conversation is an exploration around the power of pilgrimage, the ancient practice of walking land and rivers as a way to connect us back to self, each other and the landscapes we're part of. We hosted a wonderful guest, Zofia Page, who is Executive Director of Friends of the River Medway over in Sussex, another brilliant river-based movement doing awesome things to bring life back to the river, land and communities of the Medway, and who have been centering the practice of pilgrimage as a core part of engagement and regeneration. Alongside Zofia was Hamish Evans, regenerative farmer of middle ground growers here in Bath, river pilgrim, prefigurative activist and fellow co-director in We Are Avon. This was a conversation about the practice of pilgrimage. What is it? What have these two learned from their experiences, and how might more of us step up and get involved? In a time where mainstream reality is falling apart rapidly, perhaps these ancient practices of walking the land, moving through landscapes together in community, might offer us different perspectives deeper connections and other ways of seeing this moment and the future that we're surely being invited into co-creating. The We Are Avon Pilgrimage is this solstice weekend. The Medway is 18th to the 27th of July. Everyone is welcome to walk as much or as little as you like, and I'll put the details of both those in the show notes. There are river movements rising like springs all over the UK. Find one near you and find out what's yours to do. Right, let's cut to it. This is the Spaceship Earth podcast in conversation with Zofia Page and Hamish Evans. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Right, so we're gonna move into this panel chat, which is themed around tonight the power of pilgrimage, which we've been framing as like the potential for this ancient practice of walking to connect us to the land, to the river, to the self, and to each other, and building community and active community in these uncertain times, let's call them, that we're finding ourselves in. So we're gonna dig into that, but we have a special guest, Zofia Page from Friends of the River Medway, and who have been sort of working around the pilgrimage for some time. And I thought before we get into the pilgrimage sphere, because I would love to for you to share a little bit of your backstory of this project and how the Friends of the Medway came about, and then maybe you can sort of talk us a little bit about where you're at, and then we teeing it up into the pilgrimage, and then we'll get stuck into pilgrimage.
Great.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And I actually went to uni in Bristol, so the Avon has been in my life for 10 years, which is lovely. Or at least I met the Avon 10 years ago. So Friends of the River Medway, we started 6 years ago. And it was just before, I'm not sure if everyone saw that upsurge of news in September 2020 about the sewage discharges that were happening. It was just before that, whereby a woman called Ellen organised a litter pick in our local village, because she, kind of coming from more of a spiritual background, had been hanging out with the river and felt the river was communicating, I'm not living my full potential and beauty because of the litter. So she organised a litter pick, and maybe because of the fact that we'd just been in a lockdown and everyone wanted to get out there, it proved really popular, and it was really beautiful, everyone coming together and actually stepping up for the river. There was this question, how can we actually create real change for the river? Obviously going and doing litter picks is beautiful for that short-term visible change, but how can we actually create this long-term change? So a group of us came together, and I was actually, truth be told, I didn't even know the name of the river 6.5 years ago. I had the river flowing through my garden from the age of 6 and 10, and a tributary of the river flowing through my garden from the age of 10 till now. And yet I had no idea what the river's name was. I had no idea where my water came from, where it went when I flushed the toilet or put things down the tap. Deeply disconnected, in other words. And I had just been invited as a part of this project because someone had seen a video that I'd made to try and prevent this recycling centre from being shut down. And he thought she'd be good to go and send out to the farmers who are a bit grumpy, and she can give a smile and maybe they'll be convinced to stop putting fertilisers on the land. And so we started doing this project again, and we heard about these other people that were also interested in trying to help the river. And so I convened a meeting with everyone together, and we started having these discussions. And obviously it was in Zoom because we went back into a lockdown, but we started having these discussions about how can we do something for the river. And it was people that came from a law background, activist background, deep environmental work, also this sacred ceremonialist side. And we started to create what we call as our 3 streams of working, which is the practical, the legal, and the sacred. And the idea was that each would have the same amount of weight and importance attributed to them, and that there were these interconnected ways of working. So the practical is the more conservation-based conventional ways of working, so going and doing citizen science, doing litter picking, working with farmers and farming clusters to try and transition to more river-friendly ways of working, doing awareness and education and working with schools and inspiring children to become river guardians and having this river guardianship model as well. Then the legal, we had the privilege of having Paul Powsland as one of our co-founders, and if anyone knows, well, who does know about the rights of nature movement and rights of rivers? Yeah, so it's the fastest legal growing movement in the world right now, and it's on this premise that nature and rivers have rights, and yet we have not been acknowledging them, and it's about time that we start recognizing that nature also has the right to be alive, to thrive, to be full of biodiversity, to be free from pollution. So Paul grounded that in the very foundation, and it was a very niche idea then. I remember seeing him speak at a festival, and it was like, that's such interesting, but like, okay, we are never going to get that done in the UK. And the fact that 6 years on, so many councils are recognising and moving towards this framework is absolutely amazing. But so we put that in the centre, and obviously the ontology, or the way of looking that the rights of nature movement is grounded on, is very much an Indigenous worldview, whereby we see nature not as a resource or something to be extracted from, but something that is living and part of our community. So that leads me on to the sacred, which is in a way, the pillar that they all have equal weight, but it's kind of the holding of all of it. And that's about how can we come back into a relationship with the river, whereby we see it as a friend, and we see the river as not just something that flows through the landscape, but something that is directly feeding our lives, and we're feeding it, or actually we call the river she and her life. And we do that through reviving sacred ceremonies. So there's one ceremonialist who holds a tradition, a pre-Roman tradition, so I guess the indigenous traditions of these lands. And we also have someone who holds a tradition in the Andean mysticism, and they've come together and created these water ceremonies that bring people into, no matter their belief, whether you see the river as just a blue thing that kind of goes through the land, or you do feel a presence in the river. They meet people where they're at, and either way, it's just a way of becoming present, and people are blown away in just the fact that they get to see a kingfisher for the first time, or they see a cluster of butterflies, and they experience the magic no matter what they believe. So that's been our way of working, and in a way, all of these different threads came together in a big culmination last year in our first pilgrimage from the source of the river to the sea. And it had been a dream when we first started, like, let's all walk together this river. It has to happen. We need to get to know the river fully if we're to be the river's friend. And it became a living experiment in what it is to move together as a pack, as a body of water ourselves, next to a body of water, what actually happens when we do that. And 40 to 50 people came with us every single day. There were 25 that came from the very start of the journey to the end. And we integrated all of our 3 streams. We were doing citizen science, litter picking. We held a conference with councillors from across the catchment to discuss the rights of rivers approach, and also how we can move towards creating a legacy for the river and create a collaboration. And we also did water ceremonies every day. And we actually, our penultimate ceremony was in the Rochester Castle Gardens, which is where, overlooking the Medway, which is the river that the Romans came through and invaded 2,000 or so years ago. And it felt like this deep remembrance of what was once very much an ordinary state of being here in the British Isles, whereby the river was seen as alive and honoured in this way. So we are. Did you want me to say about where we are now, going into the next one?
Well, we'll pause. We'll come back to that, because that was beautiful. Thank you for that. And I guess what one of the questions we're holding, it's interesting because we see this term pilgrimage. It's growing, it's spreading. We're seeing it. You're seeing articles in the media about this growing interest in pilgrimage, but I think it's also it probably means many different things to people, and I guess I wanted to start there really because we're sort of curious as well. If you want to try and bring more people into these movements, these ideas, how do we bring others in who aren't thinking about this stuff? How do we sort of open that up? So I'm really interested in what is this term pilgrimage? Because if you sort of do a little kind of AI search on pilgrimage, you'll get something like this. It's a physical journey to a sacred or deeply significant destination, often undertaken for religious reasons, blending spiritual reflection with travel frequently serving as an act of devotion, penance, or a personal quest for transformation. There's a lot in that. And I know that, we've got all of our own experiences of what this means. But I just think, could we just start with that? And I know, Hamish, you embarked on an 8-day pilgrimage last year from the Avon, from the source to the sea. But how would you speak to pilgrimage? What is it?
Sure. My definition is very dissimilar to the AI one. Yeah, for me, pilgrimage, I pilgrimage every day. I aspire to. Sometimes it's 100 meters, sometimes it's 100 miles, which is what I did last year with the source to the mouth, which I've actually got a little draft book about, of reflections and poems and things that came to me, along that very sort of special, personal and political rite of passage, which is another form of pilgrimage. But I definitely say it isn't something for a destination or to a particular point, even though it might be for some people, or if for example, pilgrimages to Mecca and things that seem to be to a destination. But I think all pilgrims find on that journey that there is no destination, and the pilgrimage is very much more like a cyclical entanglement, relationship deepening, very personal in very many ways, but also this beautiful collective strand. You kind of move from I think pilgrimage can go on. I think when I went on my sort of first form of pilgrimage, in a way, it was travelling when younger. I sort of left home. Well, I left home at 16, moved onto a boat, which was a pilgrimage in itself, by water. I'm still on a boat now, and went off travelling, which I didn't know as a pilgrimage, but it was a kind of rite of passage. I left with no money, hitchhiked, worked on farms, came back nearly 2 years later. And I think, initially from that perspective, it was, probably thinking more along the lines of that definition you gave. It's I'm going on this, to find myself. I'm going on this, I didn't call it anything like that, but, this sort of hero's journey, or this, individual quest, or going to, have these experiences. And that sort of, relationship to pilgrimage has definitely shifted over time away from that and towards much more this, you're stepping into totally unknown. You're very, surrendering to that, very humbled by the pilgrimage, very much just, taking every day and every moment, step by step. And it's a real rite of passage, and you never know, you can't plan or expect what's going to happen or anything like that. So for me, it's that every day, bringing that pilgrimage nature into that every day, rather than this, I'm going to do this 3-day walk from A to B. That's a walk, that's not a pilgrimage. Walks are great as well. But I say pilgrimage is just walking with purpose. And there's also a kind of inner symbolic dimension to pilgrimage. My morning pilgrimage is I walk 100 meters, sometimes a bit more, if I feel like it, sometimes a bit less, just along the river where I live. From my boat, we've got a little community orchard we planted. I just walk up to there, see the sun come up, walk back, very simple, might bring a cup of tea, might be a bit bleary-eyed. It's not a very, it's particularly this sort of enlightened pilgrimage thing. It's just very much that simple act of walking and bringing that into the everyday is really important. So whether it's 100 meters or 100 miles, I think it's important to bring it in as a mindset for me. So, and it does have a kind of a religious element in terms of the sacred, or religious in terms of it's walking with a meaning and a purpose beyond the self, I guess. So it's not just a walk for this aim or for this thing. It's very much beyond those sort of more internal motivations. And for me, I think similarly to the way Zofia put it around the kind of the sacred and the practical and the sort of all the different dimensions, it's also about that. So for me, the Avon pilgrimage last year was kind of the head, the heart and the hands. It was all about practically, I really wanted to I've lived on this river, I've moved up and down this valley, pilgrimaging every 2 weeks on a boat because you have to keep moving. I've sort of done this, small pilgrimage for 12 years of my life, and I want to just know this whole valley. I want to understand the source of this water that I sleep with my head above every night, and I want to just trace back the source and walk this whole valley and just get to know that. So that in itself was just amazing. And just from a practical point of view, learning about the issues of the Avon, learning about really getting that message direct rather than Googling it, really getting that message of these are the issues. You get a much more nuanced lens on the issues and the solutions. If you read the media, it's either crisis, or there's this techno fix, or there's this solution, or there's this we can do more concrete, or whatever. But actually, it's much more nuanced. You see the river's journey of kind of ebbs and flows of it's an emotional roller coaster. It gets you see the area's just polluted. It's this kind of agricultural ditch, and then the spring pops up again, and it kind of regenerates, and it goes through this piece of land that's actually looked after, and it suddenly regenerates really quickly. You're whoa, that's a miracle. And then a bit later, there's a Wessex treatment plant, and you sort of trace the river's journey. You kind of feel part of it, and your emotions are reflected in that journey of the river. So there's a kind of heart piece as well. So there's the head, the heart, and the hands. And so it's really practical, but
And the
also
feet.
it's learning and
the
the feet. Mainly the feet, yeah. I had this obsession with like the feet walking. As like, whenever I was just like in a really tired, bleary pilgrimage day, I'd just like look down at the feet and just be like, one step, two, and it just became this almost psychedelic thing of just feet on the ground, which I can't explain. But join this year and watch your feet, see what happens.
Yeah. There are two stories on Spaceship Earth, a passenger story and a crew story. The passenger story is based on extraction, transaction and distraction, and it's leading us towards collapse. The crew story is based on connection, cooperation and participation. It leads towards regeneration.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Zofia, what for you? What's pilgrimage all about?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because I think this word has really been reclaimed in the last decades, in that it was ordinarily confined to religion. And there's an amazing author called Phil Cousineau. Has anyone heard of him? Well, if you're interested in pilgrimage, The Art of Pilgrimage by Phil Cousineau is an incredible place to start. And he speaks about the origins of the word, and it's this walking through fields. Is actually peregrinus in Latin is what it actually talks to. And I think the pilgrimage that I've been drawn to is that element of going and getting to know nature, and very much similarly to you, it's starting with the river, and I've since walked along other rivers. And it is walking with purpose, as you said, walking with intention. So wandering through a landscape with the desire to transform on some level. And I loved that you used that word, because for me it really is that transformation. And in that, it's inevitable that as you move, your mind starts to quiet. When you're moving with intention, you're also slowing down. You're starting to notice the landscape around you, which is very much the distinction between pilgrimage and a walk, because on a walk, you might be chatting with the person next to you and just like, all of a sudden you've gone 10 miles and you're like, whoa, where are we? How did we get here? Whereas on a pilgrimage, you're really soaking in every part of the landscape and taking time to notice the difference in temperature, or the way that the river is moving, or the hearing the river and seeing how the sounds have changed. And the sacred is very much, of course, at the center. It's like this, and the sacred, I say that word can also have a lot of baggage, like pilgrimage is, but for me the sacred is just about tapping into this universal experience that we all sometimes catch a glimpse of when we're deeply present, where you're just feeling the subtle, the word magic is the only thing that comes to my mind, but that subtle magic of life that is there. And it could be as simple as when you are just having your morning tea and watching the sunrise, but you're touched in that moment. And for me, pilgrimage is what opens the ability to go into that. So it's a multi-layered experience, in that your inner world is transforming as you walk through this outer landscape. And in more recent times, it's been incredible, and that pilgrimage is also now taking on another meaning, whereby pilgrimage is being used as a channel to create change for the landscapes that we are actually walking through. So whilst we are having our inward journey and recognizing the changes that are occurring within us, both in terms of just the way that our thoughts are moving, but also in our relationship with the world around us, we're also being able to use that form of pilgrimage to create change by the conversations we have with counsellors, with farmers. Emily, an amazing woman in Cornwall, started up a foundation called the Voices of Water Foundation, and she walked for 100 miles, and it was all about, was it 100 miles or more? Sorry, it was like 1,000 miles. Yeah, sorry, I was like, hang on, that doesn't sound right. It was 900. I saw her on her 999th mile, and it was 1,000 miles, and she was using it to bring attention about the Rights of Rivers movement. And so this did happen in the past with the Pilgrimage of Grace, which kind of was like a satirical take on pilgrimage in some ways. But yeah, it was being used for a political purpose. But we're now seeing this deep intertwining of the inner and the outer, which ultimately can never be separated anyway. But yeah, so I think, yeah, pilgrimage has many layers, but that's my take.
Yeah,
on the word.
and you mentioned that the source from the Latin word peregrinus, which is like being away from one's own land.
Yeah, there's different takes on it. There's walking through the field, and then there's also one who wanders in a foreign country or land. But it can be as simple as walking through the field as well.
Yeah, because I did 1 day of the 8-day last year, and for me it was a portal. It was leaving my, or whatever my ordinary day is. It did feel like I was stepping into some kind of through a portal. And maybe that's just because the way I try and look at the world these days. I'm going to get out of here. Just step through this portal. But it felt a bit otherworldly for me, or at least that's how that was the kind of energy that I was exploring, and I found that a really interesting way to actually really sort of open my awareness to the river, because I walked parts of the river I'd never walked before. So I guess there's an unfamiliarity when you come on these things, unless you know these stretches of river well. You are walking into for many of us, we're walking into kind of unknown places. But I found it quite portal-like, because we were moving in a small group of strangers at the start of the day. We were like best mates by the end of it. But there was a little bit of it felt like we were moving in a different, almost like a different time and space than what was going on around us. Do you know what I mean? And I'd only drunk ginger tea, so and I had some water, and I found that process of that intentionality of walking along a river with a group of strangers in itself a really interesting invitation. That's not something, because I would say for me it's because I walk every day, but I would say I felt slightly different, probably because I actually had no idea where we were going, and we were having to climb over fences and all kinds of stuff because the access. I mean, that's the other thing, is just you start to know the river in ways. You start to see and understand why the health of the river is how it is, which can be quite abstract when you're looking at sort of news and stuff, but actually you start to understand its flow. And the other interesting thing I found about that was really starting to see, particularly in this part of the world, the tributaries, how much water is coming off the land around Bath and Bristol, and it's extraordinary. It's just like these sort of arteries and veins that are just feeding, and you start to trace how clean some of them are, and then obviously how others aren't. But yeah, so it felt like a process of really, it felt quite portal-like, quite sort of like otherworldly. So if you're up for crossing through the portal with us in June, come along, because both of you have embarked on multi-day. I've just did a day. It would be lovely just to sort of share a little bit about what that's like to go several days, and again also just to say, when the Avon pilgrimage, the ability is to come and take part in whatever you fancy. There is no sort of need to sort of do the whole thing. But I wondered, because like Hamish, you set off with a group from, including Paul actually, Palsy, didn't you? And came along, and a bunch of others. But you set off from the source, and you did 8 days. Could you share a little bit some of the sort of experience, or some of the kind of surprises, let's say, of and because I was particularly see how other people. Also, how people notice, you meet people on the way who become quite curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to share some of the journey. So difficult to bring into sort of words and human language. Such, like, pilgrimage is such an embodied thing as well. It's just such like a, it's almost this like container as well. It's like, how do you sort of then like talk about? I've sort of been writing this kind of book of reflections, feeling like quite mixed about it. So I'm like, wow, how do I actually put that onto paper? I want to keep it as this living and breathing thing. A lot of our ancestors and indigenous cultures would have passed knowledge, information on in much more of those embodied ways, and it would be through literally written in the landscape and written in the rites of passage and the pilgrimage. But yes, I tried to, but that's where poetry comes in as well. I wanted to share a little poem, and it kind of links to that kind of that daily pilgrimage of what I really noticed on the pilgrimage. A bit like Dan said, it's kind of like a portal, like a very liminal space, and you can sort of treat the day a bit differently. You're like, oh, maybe this like little morning breakfast gathering, or this morning cup of tea, or this like starting from this source or this place or this tree that we come across, or this like willow archway we come across. Maybe this has some like significance because it's kind of like it's a journey, and there's there's sort of other dimensions to it. And as Zofia said, the kind of inner landscape reflects in the outer. And I was like, oh, well, why don't I just wouldn't it be wonderful just to live like that all the time? Wouldn't it just be this like magical way to live? But of course, it's very difficult in a way to put it into practice. And we do see things in more glimpses. But I think the more we can bring that kind of pilgrim mindset into the day-to-day, and to just really honour those glimpses, and to also just be in that, I think wonderment was probably the key word from the whole pilgrimage, was just this like, when you're sort of more present with the stuff and you're sort of noticing and kind of out of the day-to-day, I'm just like, oh, how have I not like walked this river in my life before? I lived in this valley for this 28 years and not, actually just wandered and marvelled at the river and taken a week or just over a week just to actually be with that journey. So this, there's a series of kind of like poems, writings, reflections that came to me on each day. I just like wrote a bit of a journal thing, and then I've just sort of typed it up a bit. So this is one that's kind of touches on that wonderment piece and the magic, as Zofia mentioned. Rising sun over eastern lands, restless souls receive first light, waking up hearts and hands to find our roots before the flight. Dawn chorus joins earth and skies. It's here we must arise. Climb like first sun on western hill. The midday solstice time stops still. Each day a cycle, sunrise to sundown. Each year a wheel, light plays dark. Summer's dress to winter's gown, the weave of time that we must mark. With loving wonder over fear, we cannot grasp what's never near. Shed leaves each day, sunsets in west, roots in rivers flow where we find rest. And I think, the sort of these themes are like bringing that pilgrimage into those daily cycles of wonder, and kind of why we're here was really a big message for me through the pilgrimage. And to give an overview of the journey itself, the more like outer dimensions of that, we began from Joyce's Pool on day 1, which is one of the many sources. This is another big kind of lesson and theme in the pilgrimage of like, we sort of go from the longest source and get more miles in, and go from the Tetbury, which is kind of named on some Wikipedia thing as the longest source of the Avon, and it's got a little plaque that says Joyce's Pool, source of the Avon. Lovely place to visit. It's got a petrol station nearby, a big main road, got some kind of ditches and like agriculturally drained fields, but also very special and sacred. It's sort of holding both, a bit like hearing the traffic outside and talking about pilgrimage and things. It's kind of just the contradictions. This like beautiful forest behind us in the city, and all of its own beauty. And so this realization that like, there's many sources. Setting off from Joyce's Pool, even there we were just exploring around. There was maybe like 8 or 9 or so of us gathered the night before. We camped out, slept out, some tents, some vans, some people, including myself and Paul Houseland, just sort of out in a bivvy bag under the sky. And then it started raining, and we were soggy before we started. But we were just exploring all these like multi-sources as we kind of like, at dusk we just walked around just where Joyce's Pool was and found lots of different other sort of magical waters, flows and things like that. And then realising that, it flows through everyone. Like the further we went on the pilgrimage, we're like, this tributary comes in from this like village of the bioregion, and actually that the underground water flows and the rainfall and people's grey water and wastewater, every single house and home and body is a part of the Avon in a very practical sense, but also symbolically. But it's just like literally every drop of water is all going in there somehow. We've all got a bit of garden or a bit of pot plant or a sink or something that just links us to the Avon every day. And it's a bit like food links us to the land every single day. We're all linked to land every day. But anyway, that was just one of like the source kind of exploration. So we set off on this one first day of pilgrimage. I think another load of people joined us in the morning. So we had, I don't know how we were, like 12, 15 people or so. Yeah, a good gathering. We had a sort of, there's like opening ceremony. There's lots of openings and closings and portals with pilgrimage, and it all begins before the pilgrimage, so it's all the build up to it, like this year as well. Setting intention for the pilgrimage. Some people were just like setting the intention to like mark some of the sewerage outlets in quite a practical sense and just be like monitor the ecology. Some people's intention was just to listen. I think that was my main, was just like really, this is like the listening time, understanding, and let the river speak and let the river direct this movement, and I'll just follow the instructions. I'll just like so really to listen was one main intention. So we all set off with these different intentions, but very this like collective pilgrimage journey together. And the source was kind of underwhelming. It was like we sort of stepped into the first field after going over this main road and looking out for cars, and there's a petrol leak down the down the road going into the the water source. But we sort of, we went on. We sort of went through this field, and there was this kind of vague ditch that could be the start of the Avon's great journey. Yeah, kind of tragically, but also the sign of the times. And we followed that down, and went a mile or two, through lots of fields, climbing over fences, sort of just really tracing this water and listening in, and just finding places where it might have bubbled up, or there was a sign of like a seasonal spring where there was kind of like a dry bit of land, a little depression in the land, a bit of water slopes, and it was a whole journey of like curiosity. And I think I felt a bit like disheartened by the first like couple of miles, because it was like, oh, I thought we were just going to be like following this babbling brook, and just it gets bigger and bigger, and we follow this journey and we see the river from source to mouth. But it was actually kind of a much more very non-linear, circular kind of grief and hope and all sorts in that journey. So we followed it up. Eventually we did come out to this, just when we were kind of losing heart a bit. It was really wet. We had soaking wet shoes because it's just like really long grasses and brambles and everything. And then I remember seeing these like sort of butterflies dancing. It was quite early spring. We had like frosts on some of the nights, and I was just sleeping outside. But these sort of butterflies dancing around, and this sort of blossom in the distance, and this mini like oasis like place after we went through these like dried, canalised farm ditches basically. And then we found this place called Crowdown Springs, which I kind of like to think of as the truer source, or like the downstream source, where it's like this really feels like this really special sacred site. It's been really looked after, and there's all of this like lush spring water popping up. It almost looks like a chalk stream. It's just like so clear, and loads of river plants and trees meandering through it, this kind of big guild of trees, grove around us. So we found that, and then we found like a more like steady flow, so we were able to actually follow the water, go through lots more fields, lots more hedges, all sorts. Yeah, lots of different encounters along the way, lots of different serendipities along the way. And then the second day, going in from like Malmesbury Abbey through to Chippenham, that was a much longer day. That was like 24 miles or something. It was like awful weather. I woke up with like frost on my nose, and so there's challenges of pilgrimage too, and I think that was really part of the deep lessons of the journey. But the journey carried on like that. There were all these sort of peaks and troughs and ups and downs, and the flow kind of gathered. We saw these like amazing regenerative projects and riparian restoration. Some nights I'd be sleeping out, and there'd be otters in the river. They'd wake up in the morning, there's kingfishers, all this kind of lovely very idealistic like sense of wonderment and awe to connect to the river, and like so many hard lessons as well, and had so many like realities and hard-hitting truths of how the river was. So I won't go into details because that's for everyone to discover and to embody and find, but each day had its own kind of different theme and different challenges, some going through very industrial farming, some going through very amazing oases and bluebell woods with beaver activity everywhere, and like trees everything restoring, and just like, wow, we could live in that future. And it's just this real journey and lesson of like, oh, we kind of create that reality through our actions now, through what happens with these moment in the river's crisis and river's movement, through what we do, what we eat, all those things, as well as perhaps more importantly the wider collective action that we take. So yeah, that was some of the key like lessons and reflections. And eventually, after 8 days, stopping off in towns, bringing the charters, doing lots of mini protests and activities within each city. Eventually, I went through here, the Avon's just there, and then eventually got back to my home on my boat, and then carried on another 2 days to Bristol, to Avonmouth, closing ceremony, which Meg was there for, and various others. And yeah, that was the 8 days. I guess it felt like a lifetime, but that was our experience of
yeah.
Well, I've written like 50 pages about it. It's only a little glimpse.
I did a day with you, and it was like the longest day. it's like wow, this pilgrimage stuff, it's long. It's long. It's long. Are we in the air yet? And it's like no, we've got to keep going. And then of course you can't get over the path, and you have to climb over a fence and route round. So it's quite a humbling experience.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
If you'd like to support the running of the Spaceship Earth podcast, head over to our Substack and sign up. You'll get every episode straight to your inbox, weekly writing, plus other crew offerings. We're grateful for whatever you can give. Join us at becomingcrew.substack.com.
You've obviously been doing the same thing, but tell us a little bit about some of the highlights, what happened on this, because yours was an 8-dayer as well, wasn't it?
It was 9 days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I really like what you said earlier just about kind of wishing you could do it forever, because that was almost universally the feeling that we had on our pilgrimage. It's like we could just do this forever. And I think it's just beautiful when you start out on a journey kind of having some sort of expectation. I had no idea what was going to happen really, but I had some sort of it, and it was totally shattered in every way, but totally exceeded any small expectation that I had. And I think it's different. I had the privilege of holding and leading the pilgrimage, which is one specific experience, and then I've also done pilgrimages where I'm just solely a participant, blending into the magic of the experience, and were quite distinct. And for me, the River Medway Pilgrimage, like the purest highlights or magic was just the physical act of walking together as a pack, as a band or small tribe, going through the landscape, foraging berries, and just remembering what it actually is to be a human on this earth, when, you know, in our ordinary life we're so far removed from what has been for the most of history how humans lived, and now we're living in mostly boxes or rectangular or elongated rectangle boats, but inside most of the time. I mean, I remember seeing, the shocking fact that most of us actually spend less time outside than inmates. And that is most of our existence. So just being on this pilgrimage, remembering what it is to be around a fire, speaking very honestly and frankly about how we feel about different things, and seeing the magic of the stars in a shared experience. Like often I'm, do these things alone, going on my own kind of little trips, but actually being in a collective and feeling that together, and following the footsteps of people who have gone along this river for thousands of years, and plugging into this human and the rest of nature's story that has been written far beyond us, and knowing that we are just this small little grain of sand along that way, but that we are in that continuous cycle. And I feel like pilgrimage acts, as you said, the word portal, it acts as a portal to go into that universal landscape that we share. And it was also just the ceremonies were absolutely magical, for just to see the people's transformations, the people that came extremely skeptical and like, what on earth is this? Especially because we had this, in the high weald, it's very clay based, the land, and so we'd created these little clay offerings to give to the river, and actually people had donated gold, which was then melted and created little small offerings with the gold to put into the clay at all the different confluence points. And basically it was quite extraordinary, the amount of people that stepped up to do that.
What's that telling us?
Well, I think I feel like there's this deep impulse or feeling, at least where I live, that we know that we can see that things are not the way that they should be, and there's this feeling of things are out of balance, and how can we give back in a way that can create this sense of harmony with the landscape again. And a lot of the people that gave the offerings are more spiritually inclined, so they felt that call because they felt like they were genuinely giving a gift to the river, and something would happen because of that. So it was quite phenomenal. The one of the highlights was the ITV came and covered the pilgrimage, and they came to one of our water ceremonies, and I'm here like holding up the clay, showing all of because each of them had a beautiful geometric pattern imprinted into them. So I was holding it up for everyone to see, and they captured it, and we saw the next day we saw what they'd published. And he's like, it's quite unorthodox, but they are managing to get all the councillors to come together. And like it was so beautiful, because it was like this thing that could have just been totally, put down as like, what are these people doing? What is this cult, basically? Yeah. But it was like, just kind of, they really got it, actually, the cameraman, like really got that we were trying to explore what is it to actually experience the river as alive and giving the river offerings. What does that feel like? Will our relationship with the river change because of that? And my main highlight is coming at the end of the journey already. Very much the pilgrimage had started before the pilgrimage actually started with the steps, with all the people, and the river was very much flowing through me at the start of the pilgrimage. But at the end, just recognizing my whole kind of early 20s, or from the age of 18 really, that I'd been on this search to other cultures to try and make some sort of meaning of this life and understand, my place within it. And so I'd gone to do Buddhist Vipassana retreats or learning from indigenous wisdom from the Americas. And by the end, just actually standing there being like, wow, this has generated all the wisdom that I could ever have wanted. And the phrase, I am the river is me, the very well-known proverb from the Maori people in New Zealand, like that not being an intellectual exercise, that just being a genuine thing that I could never forget, that it's very much always in me, in my blood, in the water that I drink, in the food that I eat. So quite profound ontological shifts. And one more thing, very quickly, I think is a highlight, is the people that you meet along the way. As you said, it's kind of like everything just all of a sudden, you've just opened yourself up to the magic of the world, basically, and just these characters just pop up. And in a recent one, I helped facilitate along the River Lee. We went to go do an offering at the river, and I'd seen this kind of small settlement, but I was like, I think someone's like created that settlement and it's kind of now their back garden, so maybe we just leave it. And he just like all of a sudden this guy with like a beer can just runs over and he's like, hey, this is everyone's space. And he like started created a fire for us, started putting tea on, made a fire pit, and he was just like, right, enjoy, and just left. And it's just like these people that just come like this, it feels like you tap into this flow of generosity, and like because you've humbled yourself and you're like, whatever comes my way as a pilgrim, there's no expectation and I will just accept what comes. All of a sudden you are showered with every gift you can imagine. So yeah, that's a few of the things that I loved.
My very divergent mind has gone off somewhere, but I'm going to bring this in. So I was away this weekend and I was on a retreat, and I came back and I turned on stuff and I saw the flag shaggers up in London, the Unite the Kingdom march thing going on, and I'm quite curious as to this kind of like, this is our land, patriotism and all this kind of stuff, and yet so this process of stepping onto the river and walking and really sort of exploring our place, to me would be a real kind of a showing of belonging to a place, to a land. And it reminded me, who you've already mentioned, Paul Pousland, who came on the podcast a few years ago, and he said this. He's like this idea of turning indigeneity from a noun into a verb. So he'd say it's not about whether you're born here, it's not about your bloodlines, but do you connect with this place? Do you love this place? And I'm kind of really interested in that at the moment because of this divisiveness and this tension, and could think, because I also get a sense that the way the pilgrimages are growing, is core groups, mainly, I guess, of people that are in the space of regeneration and protection. And but I guess I'm wondering, should pilgrimages try and bring, more people in who to kind of walk this stuff together? I don't know, because it feels like we're, when we look out into the world, this is the stuff that's really on edge.
No, I mean, I feel like that, to revisit what I had said just before of like having gone to other cultures, I always felt ashamed to be from England because I studied history and had gone very deep into colonization and colonization of nature as well. But then when you go into the kind of the deeper history of these isles and that sense of belonging to the land, not an ideology, or it's like that universal, wherever we are, on whatever land we are all sharing of this earth. And so I feel like pilgrimage can help you come out of those concepts of I'm from this religion or this sect, or I belong to this culture, or whatever it is, because you are just literally stripping yourself of all of that. And so in a way, I find there's many medicines for this time, but I feel like it is a potent medicine for this time, for many reasons, in the sense of relating with strangers that you've never met before and becoming best friends at the end, or actually connecting to ourselves and knowing ourselves again, connecting with nature and stripping ourselves back and seeing the universality that we all actually share. So yeah, I think it could be great. It could be great to start conversations.
And you'll find, and we're seeing, and you mentioned it with the Friends of the Medway bringing kind of counsellors on, like the process of actually walking together has had a massive impact in like shifting law and policy and decision making, which I think is such an amazing thing to think about. Because when you think of like how policy and law tends to work at the moment, you're like, this idea that it could be co-created in some way, or influenced not just by local politicians, but by community, by the land, by the river, that all these different life forms are actually influencing. That for me is a really, that feels like a really, so like, is there anything, how do you keep going with that? Like for this year, for example, are you dragging the counsellors down, or what's going on? How's it?
Well, no, I didn't actually, I forgot to mention, which is a huge part. I knew there was going to be a question related to this later, so I was like, I'll hold on to it. But so when we held this conference last year, we invited all the councillors from across the catchment to come together, and they'd never met each other, even though, obviously those downstream are affected by those upstream, but they'd never actually come together. So why would they? That's not how councils kind of operate. And it was so incredible because we came down together to the river, and obviously we knew that no one was going to be able to institutionally declare that the river had rights on that day. We were more just holding the discussion and bringing in people like Paul and Neil Williamson and Monica Faria-Tinta to come and discuss the rights of nature approach to them. But everyone came to the river and made an individual pledge. And in that moment, people from Maidstone Council pledged that they would work towards getting rights for the River Medway. And normally, these discussions and decisions are made in rooms that are completely devoid or stripped of nature. And so for them to be able to go and connect with the river, having walked the day before with us, it's like they were building that connection and relationship for themselves. And just last month, it's been a long process because they've been really wanting to make sure that it's not just an acknowledgement of the river's rights, though that is very much incredible and a fundamental shift in how councils are relating to these ecosystems. But they wanted to make sure that they were actually creating change by acknowledging the rights of the river. So working with Paul, after that pledge that they created on the bridge, they started to create this rights of nature framework, and it's the first of its kind in the UK. And it basically means that they're acknowledging the rights of nature, but also writing it into their policy. So now whenever they make a policy or decision, they have someone representing the river, the trees, the different parts of the ecosystem, so that that perspective is actually informing the decision making, which is huge. Like, again, if we'd thought of that as a possibility a few years ago, I mean, it just was totally off the map. But it's like these things are actually being taken really quite seriously. And I mean, Maidstone Council, anyone from Maidstone, they wrote on our post like, I can't believe Maidstone did this. Like, it's like, do you know Maidstone? Well, I mean, I think it's incredible that the people in the council are extremely progressive. And it is just absolutely phenomenal. So as you said, it's like those different layers that are working there, where you're really seeing the decision makers inspired by going out and forming a relationship with nature themselves, but also genuinely listening to what communities are asking. And that's the power that we all have in this room, is that we are the ones that are helping to inspire those movements to happen by just acting as a voice for it. And so this year, once again, we're walking again from the source to the estuary. And we're going to be gathering again with those councillors. So now 3 of the 6 councils have acknowledged the rights of the river in the catchment. So we're going to be gathering them again and talking how, more broadly, trying to get the other 3 councils to acknowledge the rights of the river, but also how can we move it from theory to practice like Maidstone has done, and starting to advance that. So that's our plan for this year with the councillors.
Amazing. Hamish, what's happening in our neck of the woods with the bringing in like the local decision making folks?
Yeah. We'll just pick up on that point of the sort of the political aspect, the personal political part of the pilgrimage, and the sort of the river is this great like bridge, like that a bridge builder, kind of unifier. As I said, it's kind of literally, symbolically, everything is just all like connects us all. And so I think that's what we've experienced in our work with like the regional councils, with all the different stakeholders, like working across quite diverse groups. And that's, I'm really interested in that at the moment, that kind of like those political edges and those kind of like working across boundaries of like the almost like the common ground for like, you know, just getting the basics right. Like we care for our rivers, they can't be like this bad and in crisis. And also, you know, recognizing like we've got to be like, you know, working outside of our silos. And I remember from the pilgrimage that like I feel like, oh, I could just like walk, you know, along this river with almost anyone, like be like this like political leader I disagree with, or this other person, or just that, and just like bring them into that. It's more like we usually meet them in their power places, all those things. We go and fight it in Parliament, we go and fight it in London. We wear our suits as farmers and go to the farming conference to speak to the politicians and all these things. We fight them on their terms, and and actually it's like bring them to the forest, bring them to the rivers, fight the battle on the terms of nature, and bring nature into the board, bring nature into the decision making, bring nature into Parliament, into all those spaces.
As well, you're dropping your guard a bit.
Yeah,
particularly walking and moving.
Definitely, yeah. And I think, yeah, the embodiment of it and the practice of it, and the, you know, there's just a great unifier. Like I had so many amazing, like serendipitous and wonderful chats on the pilgrimage, just like speaking to sometimes like quite sort of what people might see as like mainstream farmers, or, you know, people that might be seen as part of the problem, or people that worked in the water industry, and all these things we like label us and them and all of that, you know, what I see is quite nonsense, because we're all entangled and we're all part of it and all part of the becoming and part of the solutions too. But having these amazing, like, you know, transformative but sort of quite common sense dialogues about how, like, you know, chatting to these farmers and, you know, just like, yeah, be like, oh yeah, they've really seen the degradation of that river over time, and they've been like the history that was shaped when you walk the pilgrimage and see, you know, like we walked through this like Nestle factory that was like straddling the river and like sort of diverted its flows, and Nestle was at the heart in, you know, in Wiltshire and Somerset of basically forcing farmers through economic pressure and them being in debt and not, you know, to kind of shift towards mainstream agriculture to feed their factories, and then the whole agriculture shifted. It was suddenly all like wheat for their cereals, and then it shifted to all like industrial dairy for the milk for their cereals, and you can see it in the landscape, and it's how the food system and the industrial side links to that. And yet, talking to this farmer on the ground who'd been caught up in this, and his granddad was the arable farmer, he was a dairy farmer. It's a huge, big industrial thing. It was like a crazy place to walk through. Like it's the sort of, not quite to the level of factory farms in America, but sort of somewhat to that. It was very hidden from, you wouldn't usually see it if you weren't on this random pilgrimage. But, you know, speaking to him on like a, you know, really common ground about like the river's issues, and also the potential of farmers, if they're supported, to like do stuff for it and to, you know, work on those solutions and things like that. So that really struck me, and that moved me a lot on the pilgrimage. And so we're trying to bring that into the movement. That was one of the main lessons of bringing in that bridge building, bringing in that working across boundaries, getting all the voices that aren't usually in the environmental space into this discussion.
So we're actually racing through time. So Zofia, will you tell us a little bit about this year, like what, because I mean I saw a little bit about you, and there's like boats and everything involved and stuff, so could you just talk a little bit about what you're doing and, just how it's evolving, I guess.
Absolutely. No, Guy Hayward of the British Pilgrimage Trust, he came last year and he was like, you've just taken it to a whole other level. It's like total, like we went out on these sailboats out into the estuary. It was quite incredible. So this year again, we're starting at the source, and the people that are doing the pilgrimage from the very beginning to the end will be starting together from the source in silence to Forest Rome. And really the first few days are just quite gentle. And actually our theme for this year, because we felt that each year the pilgrimage should have a core theme and intention, is gentle, quiet connection. And how can we form a gentle, quiet connection with the river and really learn to listen? And so this year we're actually integrating an hour's worth of silence every day, so that we can travel together in silence, because, you know, everyone's so excited. There's so much bubbling excitement on this. Last year it was just like, so we didn't, despite being 40 to 50 people, there was not one single conflict. the whole time. And you are tired, and but when you have that common purpose and being in devotion to something greater than yourself, it's like you could just easily just strip it down, like, okay, let's flow like the river, or let's lean into the river's wisdom. So this year our core intention is to continue listening to the river. And so the first few days are just quite gentle, just allowing the pilgrimage to unfold. And then we have a day in Maidstone where we are going to basically do a kind of a larger engagement day. And another core intention of this year's pilgrimage is to really elevate children's voice and the youth, and to hear what they actually want and how they think that we should be caring for the river. So on that day, we're going to be doing litter picking and some citizen science workshops, but also bringing in the children to create mini rafts together, and then for them to start sharing their stories of why they're inspired by rivers and what they want for the river. And then we'll continue on, and the next day is our conference with all of the counsellors. And actually building on that piece of connecting the counsellors with nature, we're actually going to be taking the counsellors to some megalithic sites that are just 45 minutes walk away from where the conference will be. So we'll walk over to the megalithic sites, explain about the history of these sites and that way of seeing that was once so held by the peoples of that time, and then walk down in silence together to the river for another moment to take a pledge for the river and build upon the seeds that have already been planted. And then we will go on to Rochester, so that's in Aylesford. If you ever get to go to that part of the country, Aylesford has it's called the Friars, and it actually has pilgrim accommodation, and it's got the oldest courtyard in England, and it's so beautiful. So if you ever manage to get there, I just want to plug that place because it's just absolutely gorgeous. So we'll walk from there to Rochester, and then on our penultimate day, we'll do another day, engagement day in Rochester. Last year, we basically did everything in Rochester Castle Gardens and then went over to Chatham, but this year we're just staying on Rochester Castle Gardens, again doing litter picking and citizen science, but then moving into holding an interspecies council. So people will basically be gathering together and taking on the perspectives of different species and how they're experiencing the river right now and what they want, basically. And the children will be leading the process as well. So it's bound to be quite entertaining and also deeply, deeply empowering and interesting. I feel like I'm going to learn a lot. And then we will do a big ceremony all together. And basically these ceremonies, we essentially create a willow raft, and then people bring flowers and different seeds and things that people have gathered along the way. And it's like this beautiful thing where all the offerings of the land are then offered back to the river, and we'll be weaving that together. And then the evening will end with... So I love how again, if you open up pilgrimage, just random people come and offer beautiful and extraordinary things. But we'll basically be going on a boat, and we hold these things called Fed by the Medway. These are dinners, basically, where it's a celebration of the food that has been grown in the Medway catchment. And again, the celebration of the fact that the river flows through all of us, and it's a tangible expression of one of the many gifts that the river gives us. So we'll be doing one of those events on the boat, and then a wonderful professor called Professor Carl Hayden Smith, who specialises in sound and how it affects our consciousness, will be doing an experience where people will be listening to the sounds of the river from underwater and then seeing how that shifts, and the pilgrims will then be telling their stories, and it will kind of be a celebration and public closing event. And then the last day will be going out onto the sailboats and our grand exit into the estuary. And there are 4 incredible old Thames barges, and we'll be going out in these sailboats together, doing the final offering, and then returning and having a final sharing all together. So it's quite, I know when I was speaking about it, I'm like, wow, what an amazing journey I'm about to go on. And through it all also be, in the kind of more practical sense, we'll be doing citizen science and building that baseline. And I loved it. I was actually on a panel recently about sewage, and someone from, I'm not going to name what organisation actually because I don't want to put them down, but an organisation, a river organisation, said, but the thing is, like, you're not, that's kind of biased when you do these things, because like there could have just been a sewage discharge. And I'm like, well, that's the point. We're showing that sewage is being discharged and that needs to stop. Like, that's kind of the point of these things. So part of the journey is to just continue showing to the local communities, this is what's happening, this is the reality, and this is why we need to create change. And but the core impulse of our pilgrimage is to be the beacon of light and hope rather than pointing the fingers at the water companies, though that's very much reality, but trying to create forward movement rather than continuing to stoke the fire of anger, which is a powerful force in itself, but more devoted to love in these pilgrimages.
Or just to add, what really rings true there is like the sort of the joy and that kind of the joyful creative activism, which I think we're also really trying to like embody. That as a really big lesson from last year's pilgrimage, and also like how the Raven for the Avon has gone about their work in terms of like creative activism, arts, and like the sort of, when we talk about like the sacred and pilgrimage, it can be very like serious, but actually it's like there's a very thin line. There's like the sacred and the silly, and just to like bring that like pilgrimage could be like it's actually very light in a way, just sort of like walking every day, and like a lot of the day-to-day moments, we reflect on them quite philosophically, and actually the day-to-day moments are just like the sacred and the silly, and just like those the moments with a chap called Mark, and just like sort of holding his hand, guiding across this like brook that we were both like treading on this thin branch across, and just like it's just like both falling in and like just be like completely cracking up the whole day, like making mistakes and all sorts of things along the route. I also wanted to mention the intergenerational part, which also brings in like the sacred and the silly and all sorts. And there was one day, I think it was the day when you were there, Dan, we had like our youngest pilgrim, who was Rowan, appropriately named. No, it was like 5 weeks.
5 weeks.
He was like tiny. So he joined his first pilgrimage. I wish I had pilgrimaging at 5 weeks old. And on the same day, had Sarah there, who was like 85. And my mum joined as well, in the late 60s. And just this intergenerational pilgrimage that brings people together across ages, across generations, and across time as well, because we're like connecting to like our ancestors. So it's beyond just like young age to older age or something.
It was across species as well. I got sucked up by an oak.
You did. You disappeared
into an oak portal for a few hours. Wasn't it? Yeah, be careful what happens on these pilgrimages.
Can I quickly be careful? No, just that singing. I forgot to mention that singing is I don't know if you sang along the way, but it's such an amazing part of pilgrimage, and this revival of pilgrimage that's happening on the Isles very much by people like Sam Lee, and that bringing song, and both songs of this land and beyond, but being able to sing the songs that folk songs of this land is so powerful together. And literally there are scientific studies that show that when you sing or you do a ritual together, that your hearts literally start beating at the same time, and you're in this collective field. So I just wanted to add that, because song is such a joyful part of pilgrimage, and it's like really this new songs start to develop. An amazing woman started to create a song about the pilgrimage as we were walking, and it's like really such a creative movement.
You've just teed me up for that saying that the longest journey you'll ever take is from your head to your heart, and to come out of the rational mind into the heart. It's only 18 inches, but suppose it takes most of us our lives, and potentially never. So there's something in that.
Well, maybe I reckon a pilgrimage will definitely get you there in a few days.
I'm there.
That's the fast track.
I love the intentionality of what you're doing, and I just love that like loading intention. I think that's such a beautiful thing to sort of, to co-create and really load up at the start of these experiences, because I really believe that intentionality can really open up a lot as well. It's amazing what you're doing. We could go on, but I'm conscious of time, and that we've got to bring ourselves back to the We Are Avon pilgrimage. Just to finish off, could you each offer just a little to maybe those that are sort of still a little bit on the fence of, is this for me? Maybe there's just something like, I don't know, a couple of tips or something that's worth just kind of thinking about to sort of step into the pilgrimage, what would you share for those that are sort of 50-50? Is this for me?
Just starting. I guess the We Are Avon pilgrimage, bridging it to that, is a way we're kind of like facilitating a space for like the first 2 days, which is more like, holding a bit more organised. There's a bit more events. There's a free sauna. There's food. There's all these things. So it's a bit quite structured, which pilgrimages often aren't. There'll be loads of unknowns and things. But then after that 2 days, it's like we're really inviting and want to empower anyone. Don't wait for an event. Don't wait for a pilgrimage or anything. Like after those 2 days, or whenever you want, of course, too. We're invited. Like I'm going to certainly carry on. We're going from the mouth to the source this year, but I'm going to certainly carry on all the way back and see which tributary or which source takes me. But we want to bring the whole watershed in. So if you've got like a local stream or a local tributary and a local pond in the garden or anything like that, like making that daily water relationship part of the pilgrimage as well. And there was a great kind of, I don't know how to just describe it, this sort of like rivering of the self as you go on the journey of like this like sort of blur, self and river blur, and you sort of become the river. And just like the name We Are Avon kind of comes like we are the river. And it was also a move from the individual, like from the I or the personal journey to like the collective journey. So the we is really important too. So it's like we are Avon, we literally are the river. So I've got a little poem to close on that note. I'll just close this part. We do this work not for the river, but as the river. Let her speak through us. Let us flow with her, becoming kin with place, together remembering what it could be to live into tomorrow's dawn. A bountiful world of clear spring waters, sparkling in the sunrise of a new relationship, bathing in hawthorn blossom, as we float downstream to our birthright, our birth responsibility of collective liberation. Moving from me to we free ourselves through freeing waters, from source to spring to tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamish. Zofia.
I'd say that all of these things that we've shared are just words, and that it is the act of going and doing pilgrimage with open eyes and no expectations that will make any of this actually meaningful. And it is, anything that we've shared is really only comes into being when it's lived by you. It's yours to take, or yours to enter into as a relationship. So if you're not yet convinced, I hope that you can find some spark of inspiration in you, because it really was and is the most transformative thing that's happened in my life and continues. I think anyone that goes on a pilgrimage becomes a pilgrim addict, basically. That just becomes, it's a natural inclination towards just always wanting to do that for the rest of your life. And I think that speaks volumes in itself. But I think the beauty is that it meets you wherever you are. So it's like, if the sacred part isn't what inspires you, just being able to go and connect with wildlife and see things that you've never seen before in and of itself is such a moving experience. Or to know where our water comes from and just have that other extra depth of layer of experience in life, because you've started to see things that are always interwoven into our daily lives, but we aren't ordinarily connected to it. So yeah, keeping open to the experience is basically my biggest form of ending or closing, but and to go and have this lived embodied experience yourself. Allow the words to settle in you, but then be lived.
Beautiful, thank you. So before we just wrap up, just to say we're going to have a little break and then have a drink, have a little break, and then Meg's going to bring us back into the space with the plans for the Avon pilgrimage in June. So yeah, thank you, Zofia, and thank you, Hamish. Round of applause. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that one. Does it make you want to go out and pilgrimage, sort of travel through the portal into the mystery of the land? I highly recommend. Let us know if that spoke to you. Love to hear from you. Drop us a message if you enjoyed it. Yeah, share it with someone else who might. Post it on your socials. Give us a rating. Put it in a WhatsApp group. All of this stuff is essential, because it's the only way that these conversations and these ideas spread, because, let's face it, mainstream media won't go anywhere near us. If you want to stay up to speed with the podcast, with the Becoming Crew events, with experiences, with my writing, the best way to do that is subscribe to the Substack, becomingcrew.substack.com, and you'll get all of that emailed into your inbox. And if you really like what we're doing, perhaps you might consider a monthly donation on the Substack. It's about a price of a pint of beer. Thank you to all of our existing subscribers for your ongoing generosity and support of this project. Right, I'm off to prep my pilgrimage kit for next weekend. Yeah, look after yourselves out there. Spread the love. Spread the love. Until next time, peace and out.
This podcast is created in service to life, for you. It takes time, funds and energy to make. If you'd like to contribute to the running costs, you can donate the price of a cuppa or a pint. Find the link on our website. This podcast wouldn't exist without the following crew: Charlie Shred, Audio Jedi; Seaman Home Burgess, Engine Room; Willow Burgess, Jingles.